This story is inspired by real-life situations and includes fictional elements for entertainment. Not recommended for viewers under 18.
On a quiet Friday night in Chicago, the city lights reflected softly against the glass walls of Daniel Carter's apartment. Everything looked the way a stable life should. 2 wine glasses on the table, soft jazz in the background, the calm routine of a couple who had been together for years. Then his phone lit up with a photo message meant for someone else. A mirror selfie. Olivia, his girlfriend, laughing in a stranger's bedroom, a man's arm wrapped around her waist. Some secrets don't explode all at once. They crack open slowly, revealing things you wish you had never seen. And if stories about love, betrayal, and the fragile truths behind closed doors intrigue you, stay a little longer. There's much more hidden beneath the surface of nights like this. Chicago in October carried a particular kind of quiet. Not silence, the city never allowed that, but a softened rhythm. Wind brushed against the glass towers downtown, and the lake air carried the faint smell of cold water through the streets. From the 32nd floor of a modern apartment building near Lakeshore East, Daniel Carter stood in his kitchen watching the skyline. The lights of passing cars traced thin red lines along Lakeshore Drive. Behind him, Olivia Bennett was humming while scrolling through her phone. "Do you want the Pinot or the Cabernet?" Daniel asked without turning. "Cabernet," Olivia replied automatically, still typing. He poured 2 glasses. It had been like this lately, small conversations drifting between them like polite strangers sharing a train compartment. When they first moved into the apartment 2 years ago, evenings had felt different. They would cook together, argue playfully about which show to watch, sometimes fall asleep halfway through a movie. Now the television stayed off more often. Daniel walked over and handed her the glass. She smiled quickly, distracted. "Thanks." Her phone buzzed again, another message. Daniel noticed the subtle way she angled the screen away from him. It was small, almost unconscious, but he had begun noticing small things recently. Late meetings, sudden team dinners, her Instagram stories filled with smiling coworkers he had never met. "Long day?" he asked. "Launch campaign," she said. "The startup client I told you about. Ethan's company." She said the name casually. Daniel nodded. Right. He remembered her mentioning Ethan Hayes weeks ago, some tech founder whose company was growing fast. Olivia had sounded excited about the account. Her phone buzzed again. She laughed softly. "What?" Daniel asked. "Just something stupid from work." She locked the screen and placed it face down on the couch beside her. Daniel watched the motion carefully. Face down. He took a slow sip of wine. "Are you coming to Rachel's birthday tomorrow?" he asked. Olivia hesitated. "Maybe. I might have something with the client. It's Saturday. Startups don't really care about weekends." Another buzz. She picked up the phone quickly this time. A second passed. Then Olivia's expression changed barely, but enough. A flicker of surprise. Before she could react, Daniel's phone vibrated in his hand. He frowned. Unknown number. A photo message. For a moment, he assumed it was spam. Then he opened it. The image filled his screen. A bathroom mirror selfie. Olivia stood in front of the mirror wearing the same black dress she had left the apartment in earlier that evening. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, a tall man stood with one arm loosely around her waist, his chin resting near her shoulder. They both looked relaxed, familiar. Olivia's head tilted back slightly in laughter. Below the image was a message. "Still thinking about tonight." Daniel felt the room tilt. He looked up slowly. Olivia was staring at her own phone. Her face had gone pale. "What is it?" Daniel asked quietly. She didn't answer. He turned his phone toward her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The city lights flickered silently outside the window. Olivia finally exhaled. "Daniel, Who is he?" Daniel asked. The question landed heavily in the room. Olivia rubbed her forehead, already irritated. "It's not what you think." Daniel laughed once soft, disbelieving. "That's a photo of you in another man's bathroom." She stood abruptly. "Why are you acting like this is some kind of crime?" "Because it looks exactly like one." Her expression hardened. "It was just once," she snapped. Daniel blinked. "Just once?" She crossed her arms. "Seriously, Daniel, get over it." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. And then she added something that would echo in Daniel's mind long after this night ended. "He's better in ways you stop trying to be." The silence that followed felt deeper than the city outside. The wind outside had grown stronger. It rattled faintly against the tall glass windows of the apartment, a thin whistle slipping through the frame, like a warning neither of them wanted to hear. Daniel hadn't moved from the kitchen. Olivia stood near the living room couch, arms folded tightly, as if the posture itself were armor. Between them sat the photo on Daniel's phone. Neither of them needed to look at it again. "Say his name," Daniel said quietly. Olivia stared at the floor for a moment before answering. "Ethan." Daniel nodded once. The name felt strange in the room, like a stranger sitting between them. "Ethan Hayes?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. "You know him?" "I know of him," Daniel replied. "Your startup client. The one you've been working late with." The quotation marks in his voice cut through the air. Olivia sighed sharply. "You're making this bigger than it is." Daniel laughed softly again, but there was no humor left in it. "I just watched a picture of my girlfriend wrapped around another man," he said. "Explain to me the correct size of the problem." Olivia ran a hand through her hair. "It happened once. You said that already." "Because it's true." Daniel watched her carefully. The lack of hesitation bothered him more than the confession itself. Once, he repeated slowly. So that picture was, what, a farewell photo? Olivia rolled her eyes. God, Danielle, why do you always do this? Do what? This cold interrogation thing. He stared at her. You're serious? She stepped closer, her frustration building. You act like this relationship has been perfect. I never said that. No, but you act shocked that something broke. The words hit harder than he expected. Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms now. So this is my fault. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Olivia paced toward the window, staring down at the distant headlights crawling along Lakeshore Drive. For months, she said, I felt like I was living with a ghost. Daniel's jaw tightened. I was working. You were disappearing. That's not the same thing. It is when you stop noticing the person next to you. The room grew quiet again. Daniel studied her profile against the window's reflection. You could have talked to me, he said. Olivia turned around. I did. When? All the time. No, you complained about my hours. That's the same conversation. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, he said. That's a symptom, not the truth. Her patience snapped. Oh my God, Danielle. What? You want the truth? Yes. She took a step toward him. You stopped trying. The words were sharp, deliberate. Daniel didn't answer. You stopped flirting, Olivia continued. Stop touching me unless it was routine. Stopped asking about my day unless you were half looking at your laptop. That's not... And then Ethan shows up, she said, cutting him off. The name hung in the air again. He actually listens, she said. Daniel's voice dropped lower. So you slept with him? Yes, the word was quiet. Direct. No apology attached. Daniel felt something inside him shift. Not rage, something colder. And that solved the problem, he asked. Olivia exhaled impatiently. It was just once. Stop saying that like it erases the rest. She stared at him now with something close to resentment. You want brutal honesty? Daniel didn't answer. But he didn't look away either. Olivia crossed her arms again. Ethan makes me feel wanted. The sentence landed with heavy finality. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I wanted you, he said. She shook her head. Not anymore. The words echoed across the apartment. Outside, a siren wailed faintly somewhere downtown. Daniel looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. And he's better? He asked quietly. Olivia hesitated, for the first time that night. But the pause lasted only a second. Yes. The answer felt like a door slamming shut somewhere deep inside Daniel's chest. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. So that's the comparison now, he said. You asked? I didn't think you'd actually say it. Olivia looked almost annoyed now. Daniel, I'm tired of pretending everything between us was perfect. No one said it was. But you acted like the foundation couldn't crack. Daniel stared at her. The woman standing in front of him looked familiar, and completely unfamiliar at the same time. Do you even feel bad? He asked. Olivia hesitated again, then shrugged. It happened. The simplicity of the answer hollowed the room. Daniel realized something then. This wasn't just about Ethan. It wasn't even just about the photo. Something in their relationship had shifted long before tonight, and maybe he had been the last person to notice. He picked up his phone from the counter. The image still glowed faintly on the screen. Olivia and Ethan, laughing, comfortable. Daniel turned the phone face down, but the image didn't leave his mind. Outside, the Chicago skyline flickered under the restless wind, and for the first time in years, Daniel wondered if the life he believed he was building had already quietly fallen apart. 2 days later, Chicago looked deceptively calm. The October sun stretched thin across the city, soft and pale against the lake. Cafes along Michigan Avenue buzzed with weekend conversations, the usual rhythm of people pretending life made sense. Daniel sat at a small outdoor table with his laptop open, though he hadn't typed a word in nearly 20 minutes. His coffee had gone cold. Across the street, a couple laughed as they walked past holding hands. The sound grated against something raw inside him. His phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Olivia, Rachel's birthday tonight. Are we still going? Daniel stared at the message. 3 days had passed since the argument. 3 days of quiet coexistence inside the apartment. No real resolution, just careful politeness, like two co-workers assigned the same office after filing a complaint against each other. He typed the response. Daniel, you should go. A moment later, Olivia, are you coming or not? He watched the blinking cursor for several seconds. Finally, he wrote, Daniel, I'll be there. Rachel's apartment in River North was already crowded when Daniel arrived. Music passed softly through the rooms, and the scent of wine and perfume floated in the warm air. Their friend group had always liked gatherings like this, young professionals decompressing after another exhausting week in the city. Lawyers, consultants, designers, startup employees. People who measured time in quarterly results and networking opportunities. Rachel spotted him first. Daniel, she said, hugging him quickly. Where's Olivia? She's parking, he replied. Rachel smiled, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than usual. You okay? She asked quietly. Daniel forced a small nod. Just work. It was the easiest lie available. A few minutes later, Olivia arrived. Daniel noticed immediately how the room reacted, not dramatically, just subtle shifts. Friends glancing between them. The almost invisible tension of people who sensed something was off, but didn't know what. Olivia greeted everyone with practiced warmth, but when her eyes met Daniel's across the living room, the air between them cooled several degrees. Rachel handed her a drink. Marketing queen finally arrives, she teased. Still saving the world of tech startups? Olivia laughed lightly. Trying to. Which one was it again? Rachel asked. The one you've been obsessed with lately? Olivia hesitated for half a second. Haze Labs, she said. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Across the room, Mark, one of Daniel's college friends who now worked in venture capital, looked up from his conversation. Wait, Mark said. Ethan Hayes? Olivia nodded casually. Yeah. Mark whistled softly. That guy's everywhere right now. Daniel turned toward him slowly. What do you mean? He asked. Mark shrugged. His company's blowing up. AI logistics software or something. Investors are throwing money at it. He took a sip of his drink. Met him at a tech event last month. Guy's got serious charisma. Daniel watched Olivia carefully. She was staring at her wine glass. You've met him? Daniel asked Mark. Briefly, Mark said. Why? Daniel shook his head. Just curious. Mark leaned forward slightly. Actually, yeah, he mentioned the marketing consultant helping them build their brand. Daniel's eyes flicked back to Olivia. Mark smiled at her. That you? Olivia nodded. For a few months, she said. The sentence landed heavily. Daniel felt something in his stomach twist. A few months, not weeks, not recently, months. Mark kept talking, unaware of the tension tightening around them. Smart move, he said. Hayes is one of those founders people love to follow. Half the city's tech scene shows up to his networking events. Rachel laughed. Oh God, one of those startup celebrities? Pretty much, Mark said. He turned back to Daniel. You should come sometime. Olivia could introduce you. Daniel forced a polite smile. Maybe. Across the room, Olivia's phone lit up in her hand. Just for a second, but Daniel noticed. The screen displayed a notification preview before she quickly turned it over. One name. Ethan. The message disappeared before Daniel could read the rest, but it didn't matter. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Rachel began cutting the birthday cake in the kitchen, people gathering around with cheerful noise, laughter, music, clinking glasses, normal life continuing. Daniel stood near the edge of the room, watching Olivia across the crowd. She was smiling at someone's joke now, but every few minutes, her hand drifted toward her phone. And Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the timeline. Months. She had said it happened once, but tonight, another possibility had quietly entered the room. What if that wasn't the truth at all? Monday mornings in Chicago had a particular kind of weight. The city woke early trains rumbling beneath downtown streets, office towers flickering to life one floor at a time. Coffee shops filled with people already staring at spreadsheets and emails before the sun fully cleared the skyline. Daniel sat at his desk on the 23rd floor of his firm's building in the Loop. 3 monitors glowed in front of him. Numbers, reports, market forecasts. Normally, the familiar rhythm of financial analysis steadied his mind. Today, none of it registered. His phone sat beside the keyboard, unlocked. A quiet portal into the life he was beginning to realize he hadn't fully known. He opened Olivia's Instagram. The account looked exactly as it always had. Polished, bright, professional. Photos of rooftop bars, networking events, marketing conferences. Smiling co-workers holding cocktails under warm lighting. The kind of curated life that suggested success, movement, opportunity. Daniel scrolled slowly. 3 months back. A photo from a launch party. Olivia wearing a silver dress, standing between 2 colleagues. He studied the caption. Big things coming for this team. Then he noticed a comment. Ethan Hayes, couldn't have done it without you. Daniel's chest tightened. He clicked the profile. Ethan's account was public. Of course it was. Tech founders rarely hid themselves. Visibility was part of the brand. The man in the photo from Olivia's message looked the same here. Tall, confident, the kind of smile that suggested he knew people paid attention when he entered the room. Daniel scrolled. Conference photos, podcast clips, interviews, and occasionally event pictures where Olivia stood somewhere in the background. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious, but the proximity repeated itself often enough to form a quiet pattern. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Months. His phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. Olivia, did you leave early this morning? He typed back. Daniel had an early meeting. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Olivia, we should talk tonight. Daniel stared at the screen. For a moment he considered ignoring the message entirely. Instead, he replied. Daniel, about what? The response came quickly. Olivia, about this weird tension between us. Daniel almost laughed. Weird tension? That was one way to describe it. He locked the phone and turned back to his computer, but the numbers still meant nothing. That evening, the apartment felt colder than usual. Olivia was already home when Daniel walked in. She stood in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, the soft glow of the screen lighting her face. Hey, she said carefully. Daniel hung his coat by the door. Hey. The space between them felt measured now, deliberate. Olivia watched him for a moment. You've been quiet. I've been thinking. That sounds ominous. Daniel walked to the kitchen island and set his phone down. Mark said something interesting Saturday. Olivia stiffened slightly. What? You've been working with Ethan for months. Her expression hardened almost immediately. Yes? That's not what you told me. I didn't lie. You implied it was recent. Olivia exhaled sharply. Oh my god, Daniel. What? You're digging through timelines now? I'm trying to understand what actually happened. She crossed her arms. It happened once. Daniel held her gaze. Then why does he comment on your posts like your business partners? Because we are. And why are you in half his event photos? They're industry events. Daniel slid his phone across the counter. Ethan's Instagram profile glowed on the screen. You're everywhere together. Olivia glanced at it briefly, then pushed the phone back. This is ridiculous. Is it? Yes. Daniel studied her face carefully. People are starting to notice. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Mark recognized his name immediately. That's because Ethan's company is trending. Or because you've been spending a lot of time with him. The words lingered between them. Olivia's voice dropped lower. Are you stalking my life now? I'm trying to understand how long you've been lying. Her temper flared instantly. I didn't lie. Then explain the timeline. Olivia grabbed the glass from the cabinet harder than necessary. The sound echoed sharply in the quiet kitchen. You're twisting things. Am I? Yes. Daniel watched her pour water, her movements tight and impatient. Outside the window, Chicago traffic hummed faintly in the distance. Did it really happen once? He asked quietly. Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a long drink from the glass, then set it down slowly. You're obsessed with this. I'm trying to figure out if the person I live with is telling the truth. She looked at him now with open irritation. Believe whatever you want. Daniel felt the last bit of certainty slip further away, because that wasn't the answer someone gave when the truth was simple. And somewhere beyond their apartment walls, in the fast-moving professional circles of Chicago, people were already starting to whisper. Tuesday afternoon in the Loop carried the low hum of productivity. Keyboards clicked in steady rhythm across the open office floor. Phones rang, muted conversations drifted between desks, and the faint smell of roasted coffee lingered from the break room. Normally, Daniel moved through this environment with quiet efficiency. He was known for it precise, calm, the analyst who never seemed rattled by volatile markets or impatient clients. Today, his concentration kept dissolving. Numbers blurred together on the screen in front of him. Forecast projections that should have taken 15 minutes had already stretched past an hour. Daniel? He looked up. Nora Patel stood beside his desk holding a folder. Her expression carried the careful neutrality of someone who had been observing something for a while. You forgot this in the conference room, she said, placing the folder beside his keyboard. Thanks, Daniel replied. Nora didn't leave. Instead, she leaned lightly against the edge of the desk across from him. You've read the same line 3 times, she said. Daniel glanced back at his screen. Just tired. Nora raised an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling it? Daniel sighed quietly. Nora had worked on his team for almost 4 years, long enough to recognize the subtle shifts in his habits. What do you want, Nora? He asked, though his tone wasn't unfriendly. She shrugged slightly. Just making sure the most reliable analyst in the building hasn't suddenly forgotten how spreadsheets work. Daniel rubbed the bridge of his nose. I'm fine. Nora studied him. No, you're not. The directness landed without accusation, just observation. Daniel leaned back in his chair. You ever notice, he said after a moment, how people think they understand their lives until one conversation rearranges everything? Nora folded her arms. That sounds like a relationship problem. Daniel gave a quiet laugh. Is it that obvious? Your phone has been lighting up all morning, she said, and every time it does, you look like someone just handed you a tax audit. He glanced at the phone beside his keyboard. 3 unread messages from Olivia. He hadn't opened them yet. Nora followed his gaze. Girlfriend? Yes. Long term? 5 years. Nora nodded slowly. That's serious enough to hurt when things go sideways. Daniel hesitated. Talking about his relationship at work had never been something he did. He preferred keeping the boundaries clean. But something about Nora's calm presence made silence feel heavier than honesty. She cheated, he said. The words came out flat, unadorned. Nora didn't react dramatically. She simply absorbed the information. With someone you know? She asked. Not personally. Does she? Daniel looked down at his desk. They work together. Nora nodded again, processing. Is it over? I don't know. That's usually a sign it isn't. Daniel exhaled. She said it happened once, and you don't believe that? No. Nora studied him for a moment. Why? Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling lights. Because the timeline doesn't make sense, he said, and because she didn't look sorry. The last sentence carried more weight than the others. Nora tilted her head slightly. Not sorry, she repeated. No guilt, just annoyance that I found out. That must feel great. Daniel gave a hollow smile. Surprisingly, no. Nora pulled the empty chair beside his desk and sat down. You want the uncomfortable question? She asked. Daniel looked at her. Go ahead. How long have you suspected something was wrong? The question lingered. Daniel thought about late-night work meetings, about Olivia's phone always angled away, about the quiet distance that had grown between them over the past year. I don't know, he said slowly. Nora didn't look convinced. Try again. Daniel stared at his desk. Months. The admission surprised even him. Nora nodded gently. People usually know earlier than they admit. I didn't want to assume the worst. Or you didn't want to confirm it. Daniel didn't answer. Across the office, someone laughed at a joke near the coffee machine. Normal life continuing again. Nora spoke more softly now. You know what the hardest part about betrayal is? Daniel shook his head. It's not the moment you discover it, she said. What is it then? It's realizing how long your instincts were trying to warn you. Daniel sat very still. Because suddenly the past year began rearranging itself in his memory. Little details, little silences, things he had brushed aside. Nora stood up, smoothing her jacket. For what it's worth, she said, this doesn't make you weak. Daniel looked up. What does it make me? Nora gave a small, thoughtful smile. Human. Then she walked back toward her desk, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Olivia. This time he opened it. Olivia. People are starting to say things at work. Daniel stared at the screen. For the first time since the photo arrived on his phone, a strange clarity began forming in his mind. Because if people were already talking, then whatever had happened between Olivia and Ethan might be much bigger than she had ever admitted. The email arrived at 7:15 a.m. Daniel was halfway through his first cup of coffee when his phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Outside the apartment windows, the gray Chicago morning was just beginning to stretch across the lake. Low clouds pressed against the skyline, muting the usual sharp brightness of downtown. He glanced at the screen. A news alert. At first, he almost ignored it. Financial news notifications came constantly. Market shifts, startup funding rounds, corporate investigations. But the headline caught his attention before he could swipe it away. Tech startup Hayes Labs under federal ethics inquiry. Daniel's stomach tightened. He tapped the article. The report was brief but direct. Federal regulators were reviewing several large investment transfers tied to Hayes Labs' recent funding round. Questions about insider trading and undisclosed financial relationships had triggered the investigation. Daniel read the name again. Ethan Hayes. Across the apartment, Olivia stepped out of the bedroom, tying her hair into a loose knot. Morning, she said automatically. Daniel didn't respond. Daniel? He slowly turned the phone toward her. Have you seen this? Olivia stepped closer. The moment her eyes reached the headline, the color drained from her face. What the hell? She whispered. You tell me. She grabbed her own phone from the kitchen counter. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. Email, Slack, messages. The quiet apartment filled with the faint clicking of frantic typing. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. Daniel watched her carefully. Does it affect you? Olivia didn't answer immediately. That depends, she said finally. On what? On how deep the investigation goes. The words landed heavily. Daniel folded his arms. You're involved in the company's marketing. Yes. You're photographed at half their events. Yes. And you've been working directly with the CEO. Olivia shot him a sharp look. That doesn't mean I did anything illegal. I didn't say it did, but the room felt different now. The quiet tension that had filled the apartment for days was suddenly threaded with something new. Fear. Olivia's phone buzzed again. She looked down. Another message. Her shoulders stiffened. Who? Daniel asked. Work, she said quickly. But Daniel noticed the name before the screen went dark. Ethan Hayes. Of course, Daniel said quietly. Olivia ignored the comment and opened the message. Her eyes moved quickly across the text. What does he want? Daniel asked. She didn't answer. Olivia. She looked up finally. He says reporters are calling the company. Daniel felt a strange calm settle over him. So the story is getting bigger. Yes. Which means people are going to start asking questions. Olivia rubbed her forehead. God. What? My firm is going to panic. Why? Because I'm publicly connected to the company. Daniel leaned against the kitchen island. And privately? Olivia's eyes snapped up. This isn't the time. For honesty? For accusations. Daniel laughed softly. You're worried about accusations now? Her frustration surged again. You think this is funny? No, he said. I think it's inevitable. Olivia stared at him. What is that supposed to mean? Daniel walked toward the window, staring out at the gray lake. Secrets rarely stay private once journalists get involved. Olivia's phone buzzed again. Another message. Another notification. This time from her marketing firm's internal chat. She opened it. Her expression darkened further. What now? Daniel asked. My boss wants a call in an hour. About Ethan? About damage control. The phrase lingered in the kitchen. Daniel turned back toward her. You're part of the damage now. Olivia glared. Thanks for the support. I'm stating the obvious. She paced across the apartment, anxiety beginning to show in her movements. You don't understand how this works, she said. If investors panic, everyone connected to the company becomes a liability. Daniel tilted his head slightly. So the affair becomes a public relations problem. Olivia stopped walking. Don't say it like that. Like what? Like it's some kind of spectacle. Daniel met her eyes. Olivia, he said quietly, if reporters start digging through event photos and company relationships. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because both of them knew exactly what they would find. Her. Ethan. Standing side by side at nearly every launch event for the past 4 months. The apartment fell silent again. Olivia stared at her phone, then at Danielle. And for the first time since the night everything exploded, the confidence in her voice was gone. "What if they ask about us?" she said quietly. Danielle held her gaze. That single question revealed more truth than any confession she had given so far, because it meant one thing very clearly. Their story, whatever it truly was, had never been as simple as just once. The silence inside the apartment had changed. It was no longer tense or uncertain. It was exhausted. For nearly a week, Olivia had lived inside a storm of phone calls, emergency meetings, and carefully worded statements drafted by lawyers and public relations teams. The investigation surrounding Hayes Labs had spread quickly through Chicago's tech and finance networks. Journalists were asking questions about investor disclosures. Venture capital firms were quietly distancing themselves. And anyone closely associated with Ethan Hayes had suddenly become uncomfortable to stand next to, including Olivia Bennett. Daniel watched it unfold mostly from a distance. That Thursday evening, he arrived home to find her sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop open and 3 empty coffee cups beside it. The television murmured quietly in the background. A news anchor's voice filled the room. "Federal regulators confirmed earlier today that Hayes Labs' funding structure will remain under formal review." Olivia muted the television the moment she noticed Daniel. "You're home early," she said. "Meeting got cancelled." She nodded without looking up again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel took off his jacket slowly, hanging it by the door. "You look tired," he said. Olivia gave a humorless laugh. "That's one way to describe it." He walked toward the kitchen. "What happened today?" She rubbed her eyes. "My firm suspended the Hayes Labs account." Daniel leaned against the counter. "That sounds serious." "It is." "Are they suspending you too?" Olivia's jaw tightened. "Not yet." The yet lingered in the air like a fragile breach. "They think I should have disclosed my personal involvement earlier." Danielle studied her face carefully. "And did you?" "No." "Why not?" Olivia finally looked at him. "Because I didn't think it mattered." Danielle let the sentence sit there. Then he asked quietly, "Did it?" Olivia didn't answer. Instead, she closed the laptop slowly. "I've spent the last 4 days explaining my life to lawyers," she said. "I'm not doing it again tonight." Daniel nodded. "That's fair." He walked to the refrigerator, pouring himself a glass of water. When he turned back, Olivia was watching him. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Daniel leaned against the counter again. "I'm thinking about 5 years." Olivia's expression flickered. 5 years of what? Us. The room felt suddenly smaller. "We had plans," Daniel continued quietly. "Remember those?" "Yes." "House in Evanston?" "Yes." "Dog we never agreed on?" Olivia almost smiled. "Golden Retriever. You wanted a husky." "They're dramatic." Daniel nodded. "They are." The conversation drifted into silence again. Finally, Olivia spoke. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Daniel looked at her. "I don't know." Her voice sharpened slightly. "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have right now." She looked down at the counter. "I didn't expect this to destroy everything." Daniel let out a slow breath. "That's the part I still don't understand." "What? You thought it wouldn't?" Olivia's frustration returned instantly. "I told you it was one mistake." Daniel held her gaze. "Was it?" She didn't answer. And that silence answered more clearly than words ever could. Daniel pushed away from the counter and walked toward the window. Chicago stretched endlessly beneath the dark sky. Thousands of lights scattered across streets and buildings. So many lives moving forward without pause. Behind him, Olivia spoke again. "Why are you still here?" He turned back slightly. "What do you mean? You could have left days ago." Daniel considered that. "Because I wanted to understand something first. And now? I'm not sure I do." Olivia stood slowly from the stool. "What exactly are you trying to understand, Daniel?" He looked at her carefully. "When did we stop being enough for each other?" The question hung in the room. Olivia looked away. "Maybe we never were," she said quietly. Daniel felt the words land deeper than anything she had said before. Not anger, not defensiveness, just a tired truth. He nodded once. Maybe. Another long silence passed between them. Then Olivia asked the question neither of them had spoken yet. "So what happens now?" Daniel looked at the apartment around them. 5 years of shared furniture, shared routines, shared memories, a life that once seemed stable. "I think," he said slowly, "we finally tell the truth about what this relationship became." Olivia's eyes softened slightly. "And after that?" Daniel didn't answer immediately, because the truth was painfully simple. After the truth, there might not be anything left to hold together. Spring returned slowly to Chicago. The lake lost its winter steel gray color, softening into a restless blue beneath longer daylight. Sidewalk cafes reopened along Michigan Avenue, and the city began its yearly ritual of pretending the cold months had never happened. Daniel Carter walked along the lakefront trail just after sunrise. The air still carried a hint of chill, but the light felt different now. Wider, calmer. 6 months had passed. His mornings looked nothing like they used to. No shared coffee in the kitchen, no quiet negotiation over weekend plans. The apartment near Lakeshore East was gone too. Daniel had moved to a smaller place in Lincoln Park, closer to the trees, further from the glass towers that once defined his routine. The first weeks after the breakup had been strangely quiet. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just the slow dismantling of a life that had been built carefully over 5 years. Boxes packed, furniture divided, friends choosing which version of the story to believe. And then, gradually, silence. Daniel had returned to work with the same disciplined focus that once defined him. But something about the way he moved through life had changed. Less assumption, less certainty, more attention to the subtle signals people often ignore. Nora noticed it first. One afternoon, a few weeks earlier, she had glanced at him across the office and said simply, "You look lighter." Daniel had considered the comment for a moment. "I feel clearer," he replied. The difference mattered. Clarity did not erase the past, but it made it easier to walk forward. That morning, he stopped near a wooden bench overlooking the water. Joggers passed occasionally behind him. The city stirred awake. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A news notification. Daniel hesitated before opening it. Old habits lingered. The headline appeared across the screen. "Federal investigation into Hayes Labs concludes with investor penalties." He read the short article carefully. Ethan Hayes had avoided criminal charges, but faced severe financial sanctions and investor lawsuits. The company's reputation had collapsed under scrutiny. Several employees had resigned. Daniel closed the article slowly. For months, the story had drifted across Chicago's business circles like distant thunder. Now it was finally fading. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. But another memory surfaced unexpectedly. 3 weeks earlier, he had run into Rachel at a coffee shop in River North. They had spoken politely for a few minutes. Then Rachel had hesitated before mentioning Olivia. "She moved," Rachel said carefully. "Where?" "Boston." Daniel nodded. Apparently, Olivia's marketing firm had quietly transferred her to another office after the scandal cooled. "Is she okay?" he asked. Rachel shrugged. "She's different." Daniel didn't press further. Some stories didn't belong to him anymore. Across the lake, the morning sun reflected against the water in long streaks of light. Daniel thought briefly about the night everything began, the photo message, the argument, the unraveling that followed. At the time, the betrayal had felt like a single catastrophic moment, but time had revealed something more complicated. Relationships rarely break because of one mistake. They break because of the slow erosion that happens long before anyone admits it. And sometimes, people only recognize that erosion after everything collapses. Daniel stood from the bench. The trail stretched ahead along the water, filled with early walkers and cyclists. Life moving forward again. Somewhere across the country, Olivia Bennett was likely waking up in a new city, carrying her own version of the past. Maybe she still thought about the sentence she once said so easily. It was just once. Daniel understood something now that he hadn't understood then. Moments like that were never just once. They echoed. Through careers, through friendships, through the quiet ways people learn to trust or not trust again. He began walking again along the lakefront. The wind brushed lightly across the water, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt certain of one thing. Some endings weren't failures. They were the moment a person finally stopped pretending a broken story could still be repaired.